Henry Ford once said, "The only real mistake is the one from which we learn nothing." This means it's okay to make mistakes, but if your goal is to improve at something, it's important to be aware of these mistakes so you can reflect and learn from them. So in this video, I'm going to help you learn from your mistakes by going over some of the most common ones I see in every role.
Before we get into the video, if you're new to Valorant and looking to improve at the game as fast as possible, we've got just the thing for you. Over at SkillCapped.com, we recently put together a brand new Academy course that is designed to teach you everything you need to know about getting good at Valorant. All of this is also backed by our rank improvement guarantee, meaning if you don't improve while actively using our service, you get your money back, no questions asked. We do this because our service works, and if it doesn't work, you shouldn't pay. We're going to get started with the video now, but if you're really looking for the fastest way to improve at Valorant, be sure to check out SkillCapped.com, link in the description below.
And starting off strong, we have the controller role. Being probably the most important role in the game, your mistakes as a controller have a much larger impact on the outcome of the game than pretty much any other role. So let's point out what those mistakes are. The first huge mistake I see from controller mains is they don't place their smokes in the right spot. This is most common at lower elos, but even up to mid elos like gold and platinum, I still see this problem. At the worst, I see controllers place smokes that are detrimental to the team. A common example of this is on Haven, where I see a lot of players throw smoke into the middle of the C site. A smoke like this gives the enemy players the option to play in it and catch your teammates off guard as they try to push into it. This also makes it really hard to clear the back of sight, since you have to push out of this smoke if you want to do it. This mistake also encompasses other things, like not smoking deep enough or leaving a crack in the smoke, which are important to note, but I don't think they need further explanation. The second huge mistake I see from controller mains is what I like to call sleeping at the wheel. This is way more common on the defense side, but occasionally does come up on the attack when teams are defaulting more. The controller role is different from the other roles in the game because it's the only one that can affect pretty much the entire map. But I often see controller mains not looking at their map and only using their smokes for themselves. This is more common either late into a game or after playing a few games in a row. It is super important as a controller main to try your best to stay focused, since your utility is so valuable for helping your teammates hold the site. Start catching yourself when you notice you're falling asleep at the wheel, and you'll find yourself winning a higher percentage of your ranked games. The third mistake I see a lot of controller mains making is playing too passive. Yes, as a controller main, it's important to stay alive, since dying early often means the round is lost when playing the role. But especially in solo queue, you can't always rely on your teammates to make plays for you. You need to make plays for yourself by taking risks sometimes, especially on rounds where you're down a man or your team has eco weapons. Try playing in one of your smokes to catch someone off guard, or maybe even push out of your smoke sometimes. Smokes are a very powerful tool in Valorant, and learning how to play around them to secure kills for you and your team will definitely win you more games. Now that we're done talking about controllers, let's move on to the Initiator role. Similar to the controller, initiators are also a very teamwork-reliant role. And because of that, the first mistake I see initiators making is not communicating what they plan on doing. More than any other role, it's so important to talk to your teammates. Don't just walk up somewhere and start droning. Your utility gets so much more value when you have a teammate to follow up on it. Using Skye's Trailblazer to clear corners is great, but if your teammates don't push up to follow it, then what good is that? My biggest advice for the initiator mains out there is start calling out what you want to do before a round starts. The second big mistake I see initiators making is not being proactive with their utility on defense. Far too often I see initiators just sitting around waiting for the site execute. This is a big mistake. By doing this, you give your team less information, and that means less time to react to the play. If you use utility to take space early on one side of the map, one of two things will happen. Either the enemy team is there and now your team knows to start rotating early, or no one's there and you or a teammate can start pushing up on the flank. Either way, this information is very valuable, and it's a very important habit to get into if you want to start winning games more consistently. The third huge mistake I see initiators making is picking the wrong initiator for the map. Honestly, I don't really see this from controllers. You'll usually see Omen or Brim on Ascent and Bind, and controller mains will almost always play Viper on Icebox and Breeze. But for initiators, it feels like most of them main a single agent, and will spam that agent no matter what the map is. This is the most apparent on maps like Breeze, Icebox, and Fracture. I can't tell you how many times I played with the Sky on Breeze and Icebox with no Sova. Sky is okay on those maps, but Sova's pretty much a must pick. Those are maps where limited vision and lack of verticality on Sky's Trailblazer really matters. You can't really clear B main properly on Icebox with it, for example. On Fracture, I feel like I only have a Breach on my team for about 30% of the time, and for a map like Fracture, that's not good. Now, I'm not saying you always have to conform to whatever the meta is at all times. On some maps, the picks are a lot more flexible. On Bind, for example, you can get away with playing pretty much whichever initiator you want. But if your goal is to climb up the ranks and do so as easily as possible, sometimes on certain maps, you're gonna have to pick the best agent for the job. Especially when the gap in strength on those maps is so wide. Enough about initiators. I think it's time we move on to the next role on the list, and that would be Sentinels. The first big mistake I see Sentinel players making is they always group with their team on the attacker side. Yeah, being grouped can be a good idea. It allows you to trade your teammates and help out with the site execute. The thing is, though, most Sentinels don't really have utility that's necessary for site execution. A lot of the time, you're just an extra body. As a Sentinel like Cypher or Chamber, you can usually provide more value to your team by trying to lurk and holding their flank using your trips. This is great, because if the site execute ends up failing, your team can now have the option to rotate over to you freely, without having to worry about an enemy potentially being on the flank. Again, grouping with your teammates is not a bad thing, and you should do it sometimes, but also think about trying to lurk a little more when playing one of these agents. The second huge mistake I see Sentinels making is rotating way too early on defense. This is a very common one. Everybody talks about it, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it still deserves a mention. As the Sentinel, it's your job to be the anchor for your site. This means that when someone needs you to rotate over to a site to help defend, you should be leaving that job to your teammates. Yes, not rotating means you're not going to be there for the fight, but look at it from the other team's perspective. Do you really think they want to push into a site with 4 defenders on it? Probably not. This means they're inevitably going to rotate back to you, and you definitely want to be there when that happens. On top of that, by staying at your site, you're also eliminating the possibility of someone on the enemy team being able to lurk and get behind your team. As a Sentinel, I recommend you don't rotate off your site until you get a comm from your teammates that the enemies are planting. The third big mistake I see Sentinel players making is not setting up their utility before the round starts. Now, I'd love to say this only happens at lower elos, but I still see Diamond and Ascendant players doing this, especially on the attacker side where Cyphers and Chambers often forget to place down a trip to hold the flank. Now, this is the mistake that's definitely cost me the most rounds when I play Sentinel, or even when I'm not playing one. So just remember to place down your utility before the round, and you'll minimize the number of rounds where you lose to a cheesy flank. And with that, we are now moving on to the final role on the list, and that would be, of course, Duelists. Right away, the mistake that comes to mind is not using your support agent's teammates' utility to your advantage. Now, as a Duelist, it is your job to use utility to take space, but that doesn't mean you're supposed to do everything. By leveraging your teammate's utility, you'll have a much easier time pushing onto a site. By waiting for your smokes to come down, your Sova to drone, and your Breach to flash for you, you'll be able to find free kills instead of becoming a free kill yourself. The second big mistake I see Duelist mains making is holding W too hard and overheating. Now, this refers to when your team has the site on attack, but the Duelist decides to extend a little further and ends up dying while pushing too far. Once you have a site, it's no longer about pushing for kills. When the bomb is planted, the pressure is now on the defense to defuse, and as the attackers, you really just want to set up post-plant positions. This means either getting off site for agents with lineups, or for Duelists, that means getting in positions where you're hard to clear, tradable, and can set up a crossfire with a teammate. This also includes positions like Hell on A site, Ascent, or backside of C on Haven. If you're consistently taking control of a site on attack in your games, working on not overheating will help you secure more of those rounds, and also will allow you to win more games. And the third big mistake I see Duelist mains making is pushing in a way where they're effectively untradeable. It's most common with agents with movement abilities like Jet and Raze. A Jet will dash into a spot where they're stuck in the open, die, and then wonder why their team didn't help. The value of something like Jet's dash on an execute is it allows you to clear close angles safely by dashing past him, making it extremely difficult to kill you and giving your team info on the enemy position in the process. But if the place you dash to also leaves you vulnerable, you'll just die anyways and be more of a detriment to your team than an asset. Now, to avoid this, just make sure you're dashing into good positions where you're not vulnerable to multiple angles, and only do so when your team is ready to follow up. And that will conclude this video on 3 huge mistakes from every role. Are there any big mistakes you guys see a lot that you think we missed? If so, just let us know in the comments. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And as always, we here at SkillCapped want to give a huge thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.